For the last 30 years, the internet has served as the last great frontier of human liberty. It was a messy, chaotic, and often dangerous place, but it possessed one overriding characteristic that defined its culture and its power: anonymity. On the internet, nobody knew who you were. You could be a dissident operating in a dictatorship, a whistleblower inside a corrupt corporation, or just an average citizen expressing an unpopular opinion without fear of losing your job, your reputation, or your bank account. That era is officially over. We are currently crossing an invisible checkpoint into a new digital reality. The Wild West is being fenced in, paved over, and put under 24-hour surveillance. The mechanism of this closing is not a wall or firewall. It is a system called digital ID. On the surface, this transition is being sold to us under the banners of convenience, safety, and modernization. They tell us that digital ID will make logging into websites seamless, eliminating the need for dozens of passwords. They tell us it will stop the bots, the spammers, and the AI deepfakes that plague social media. They tell us it is the only way to protect our children from online predators. And to be fair, all of those things might be true, but they are the bait. The hook is something far more profound and permanent. We are moving toward a system where access to the digital world, which is effectively the modern world, will require proof of personhood linked directly to your physical body. You will no longer log in with an email address and a password. You will log in with your face, your fingerprint, or a scan of your iris. This is the creation of the biometric net. It is a digital layer that sits on top of the physical world, tracking not just what you do online, but who you are in the real world in real time. To understand the sheer scale of this ambition, we have to look at a project that seems ripped from a dystopian novel, WorldCoin. Launched by Sam Altman, the creator of ChatGPT, its goal is staggering: to create a unique digital identity for every single human being on Earth. The method they are using to achieve this is startling in its simplicity and its intrusive aesthetics. Representatives of the company have set up metallic spheres, called orbs, in cities around the world. From Berlin to Nairobi to Tokyo, people line up, often in the thousands, to have their irises scanned by the orb. In exchange, they are given a small amount of cryptocurrency, a world ID. Why would anyone do this? Why would you sell the most intimate, unchangeable part of your biology, the unique pattern of your eye, for $20 worth of crypto? In the developing world, where WorldCoin aggressively recruited early users, the answer is desperation. People need the money. In the developed world, the answer is novelty and a vague promise of future relevance in an AI-dominated world. But the implication is terrifying. The iris scan is converted into a numerical code, an iris hash, that is stored on a decentralized ledger. The company claims your actual eye image is deleted, but the hash remains. It is your permanent, unalterable digital marker. If you lose your password, you can reset it. If your credit card number is stolen, you can call the bank and get a new one. But if your biometric data is compromised, it is gone forever. You cannot get a new face. You cannot get new eyes. A breach of a biometric database is a catastrophic, permanent event for the victims. It creates a vulnerability that cannot be patched. And yet, projects like WorldCoin are just the private sector beta test. The real push, the one that you cannot opt out of, is coming from governments. Governments around the world are rushing to implement mandatory digital ID systems. In the European Union, the eID wallet is being rolled out, which aims to centralize driver's licenses, health records, and banking credentials into a single app. In the UK, there are increasing calls to link social media accounts to government-verified IDs to stop hate speech. In Australia, the MyGovid system is becoming essential for accessing basic services. In India, the Aadhaar system has already enrolled over 1.3 billion people, making it impossible to open a bank account or get a SIM card without a biometric scan. The argument is always about efficiency. Why carry a physical driver's license, a passport, and a health card when you can have it all on your phone, secured by your face? It sounds logical. But consider the power shift this represents. In the physical world, if a police officer stops you and asks for your papers, they need a reason, probable cause. There is a friction to surveillance. In the digital world, the request for papers is constant, automated, and universal. Every time you log into your bank, every time you comment on a news article, every time you buy a train ticket, the system checks your papers. It verifies that you are who you say you are. This destroys the concept of a private sphere. If every interaction is tracked and verified, there is no space left for the unobserved life. We are building a panopticon where the watcher is an algorithm that never sleeps and never forgets. The danger is not just that someone will hack the database, although that is a certainty. The danger is that the database works exactly as intended. It creates a perfect record of a citizen's life, available to any authority with the right credentials. It is the ultimate tool for what historians call administrative despotism, a soft tyranny of bureaucracy and compliance. Imagine a world where you can not watch an age-restricted video on YouTube without scanning your face to prove you are 18, Imagine a world where you cannot post a criticism of a politician on X without that post being permanently linked to your government ID. This creates a chilling effect. When you know you're being watched, you behave differently. You self-censor. You avoid controversial topics. You stop taking risks. You conform. The internet was designed to be a decentralized network of nodes that could withstand a nuclear attack. We are re-engineering it into a centralized hierarchy where the root user, the state, has absolute visibility and control over every user. This is not just a change in technology. It is a change in the fundamental relationship between the citizen and the state. We are trading the messy freedom of the analog world for the sterile, monitored safety of the digital cage. The implementation of these systems is often gradual, following a pattern known as function creep. It begins with voluntary enrollment for a specific convenient service, like skipping the line at airport security or filing taxes online. Once a critical mass of the population is enrolled, the system becomes mandatory for essential services. Finally, it becomes the only way to participate in society at all. We are currently in the voluntary phase in many Western nations, but the transition to the mandatory phase is already being drafted in legislation. The Digital Identity Trust Framework in the UK and similar initiatives in Canada and the US are laying the legal groundwork for this shift. Furthermore, the technology itself is becoming more invasive. We are moving from simple fingerprint scans to behavioral biometrics, systems that analyze how you type, how you walk, and even how you scroll on your phone to identify you. This means that even if you don't explicitly scan your face, the device you are holding is constantly verifying your identity based on your subconscious movements. We are building a world where anonymity is not just illegal, but technically impossible. The biometric net is closing, and once it is fully active, the concept of privacy will be nothing more than a historical curiosity, a relic of a time when human beings were not yet fully integrated into the machine. The true power of the biometric net does not lie in identity alone. If it were just about logging into websites, it would be annoying, but perhaps manageable. Its true power, and its true danger, is unlocked when it is fused with the financial system. This is the convergence that changes everything. We are rapidly moving toward a cashless society. In many cities, London, New York, Stockholm, Beijing, it is already difficult to use physical money. Apps, tap to pay, and digital transfers are the norm. You might go weeks without touching a paper bill. This convenience comes at a hidden cost. Every transaction is a data point. Currently, your transaction data is scattered across different private banks and payment processors. Visa knows you bought gas. Chase knows you paid your mortgage. Amazon knows you bought a book. The government can access this data, but they generally need a warrant or a subpoena. It is a slow legal process. The goal of the new financial architecture is to centralize this data in real time. This is where Central Bank Digital Currencies, or CBDCs, come into play. A CBDC is not just digital money, like what you see in your online bank account. The money in your commercial bank account is a liability of a private bank. It is a promise that the bank will pay you cash if you ask for it. A CBDC is a direct liability of the central bank, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England. When you use a CBDC, there's no intermediary. You have a direct digital wallet with the government. This means the government has a real-time, godlike view of every single transaction in the economy. They know what you bought, where you bought it, and how much you paid the second the transaction happens. But here's the catch. For a CBDC to work, it must be linked to a verified identity. You cannot have an anonymous central bank account. The government needs to know exactly who holds the wallet to prevent money laundering, tax evasion, and terrorism financing. This is where the digital ID becomes the keystone of the entire arch. Your biometric ID becomes your financial passport. Without it, you cannot participate in the economy. You cannot get paid. You cannot buy food. You cannot pay rent. Once this linkage is established, biometric ID plus CBDC, the nature of money changes fundamentally. Money is no longer a store of value that you own. It becomes a voucher system that you are permitted to use based on your compliance. Because CBDCs are programmable code, they can be given rules. This is known as programmability. We have already seen the prototypes of this. In China, during the rollout of the digital yuan, the government issued currency with an expiration date. You had to spend the money within a certain number of weeks, or it would vanish from your wallet. This was done to stimulate the economy, forcing people to spend rather than save. Imagine that power applied to your life savings during a recession. The Federal Reserve could decide that velocity of money is too low and announce that everyone must spend 10% of their savings this month or lose it. It destroys the ability to build generational wealth and independence. It turns you into a pure consumer, a conduit for capital. But it goes beyond expiration dates. The currency can be programmed to restrict what you buy. This is the ultimate tool for social engineering. If the government decides to implement a carbon rationing system to meet climate goals, Your CBDC could be coded to decline transactions for gasoline, meat, or airline tickets once you have hit your monthly carbon limit. The terminal at the grocery store won't say insufficient funds. You have the money. It will say quota exceeded. You have the wealth, but you do not have the permission. If the government wants to promote public health, your digital wallet could be programmed to reject purchases for soda, alcohol, or junk food. If they want to enforce a travel restriction during a pandemic, your wallet could be geofenced, only working within a 5-mile radius of your home. This is behavioral economics weaponized. It is the ultimate nudge, only it's not a nudge, it's a shove. It bypasses the democratic process of passing laws and instead embeds policy directly into the code of money itself. You can't protest an algorithm. You can't vote against a smart contract. The integration of digital ID and CBDCs creates a closed-loop system where economic existence is conditional. It turns off the ability to transact for those who are deemed undesirable or non-compliant. In the legacy system, if you committed a crime, you were arrested. You had a trial. You went to jail. In the new system, you can simply be turned off. Your ability to function in society is revoked remotely. This is not science fiction. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, has openly discussed the benefits of programmable money. Augustine Carstens, the general manager of the BIS, famously said, "We don't know who's using a $100 bill today." The key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. Absolute control. Those are his words, not mine. The financial fusion of digital ID and CBDC is the mechanism by which that control is achieved. It represents the end of money as a neutral medium of exchange and the beginning of money as a tool of surveillance and control. It fundamentally alters the power dynamic between the citizen and the state. In the past, the citizen funded the state through taxes. In the future, the state will allow the citizen to spend through permissions. Consider the implications for small businesses. In a cash economy, a transaction is a private agreement between a buyer and a seller. In a CBDC economy, every transaction must be validated by the central ledger. This means the central authority can decide which businesses are allowed to exist. They could block payments to gun shops or dissenting media outlets or unapproved medical providers. It creates a chokehold on commerce that can be tightened or loosened at will. The transition to this system will likely be driven by crisis. A financial collapse, a cyber attack on the banking system, or a new pandemic will be the pretext for introducing the secure solution of CBDCs linked to digital ID. People will be scared. They will be desperate for stability, and they will trade their financial privacy for the promise of safety, not realizing they are handing over the keys to their economic freedom. When you combine total surveillance of identity with total control of money, you get something new. You get a social credit system. We tend to think of social credit as something distant and foreign, something that happens in authoritarian regimes like China. We see reports of Chinese citizens being banned from high-speed trains because they didn't pay a court fine, or having their internet slowed down because they jaywalked, and we think that couldn't happen here. We are a democracy. We have a constitution. But the infrastructure for a Western social credit system is already being built. It just has different names. We call it ESG scores for corporations. We call it cancel culture for individuals. We call it debanking for political dissidents. The mechanism is the same. Compliance is rewarded, and dissent is punished by exclusion from the economy. In 2022, the world got a terrifying preview of how this works during the trucker protests in Canada. The government didn't just use police to clear the streets. They invoked the Emergencies Act to weaponize the financial system against their own citizens. They used the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada to track the donors who supported the protest. They then ordered banks to freeze the personal accounts of those individuals, without a court order, without due process, and without a trial. People who donated $50 to a political cause, a cause that was legal at the time they donated, suddenly found their credit cards declined. Their mortgages went unpaid. Their financial lives were frozen. It was an act of financial warfare against citizens who disagreed with government policy. Now, imagine that power in a world of mandatory digital ID and CBDCs. It wouldn't require emergency orders. It wouldn't require phone calls to bank CEOs. It wouldn't require the messy friction of the legal system. It could be executed instantly, automatically, by an algorithm. If your digital ID is flagged for spreading misinformation online, your CBDC wallet could be instantly restricted. You might be fired from your job because your reputation score dropped below the hiring threshold of the corporate HR software. You might be denied a rental apartment because the landlord SAI screening tool sees you as a political risk. This creates a society of profound self-censorship. When you know that every word you type, every person you associate with, and every dollar you spend is being fed into a profile that determines your access to society, you change your behavior. You become quieter. You become more compliant. You stop taking risks. You stop attending protests. You stop posting controversial opinions. You stop donating to fringe causes. The chilling effect on free speech and political dissent would be catastrophic. How can you organize opposition to a government that can turn off your ability to buy food with the flip of a switch? The proponents of these systems argue that they will be used only for good, to stop terrorists, money launderers, and pedophiles, and they will be used for those things. But history teaches us a brutal lesson. Tools built to target the worst of society are eventually turned against the average citizen. The definition of extremist or misinformation is fluid. It changes with the political winds. What was considered conspiracy theory 2 years ago is now often accepted fact. What is considered mainstream today might be hate speech tomorrow. A system with this much power requires us to trust that the people running it will always be benevolent, forever. That is a bet that humanity has lost every single time it has been made. We are creating an automated judge, jury, and executioner. In the UK, we saw the politician Nigel Farage debanked by Coates Bank because his political views did not align with the bank's values. This wasn't because he committed a crime, it was because he was a reputational risk. In the US, payment processors like PayPal have fined users for promoting misinformation. These are the soft tremors before the earthquake. Currently, you can switch banks, you can use cash, you have alternatives, but once the digital ID grid is locked in and the CBDC is the only money, there are no alternatives. There is no other bank. There is only the system. We are building a turnkey totalitarian state. The key is the biometric ID, and the engine is the programmable currency. Once built, it only takes the wrong person or the wrong crisis to turn the key. The integration of artificial intelligence into this surveillance grid accelerates the danger. AI can analyze vast amounts of data, your location history, your purchase history, your social media interactions, to predict your behavior. It can flag you as a pre-crime risk before you have done anything wrong. This is the end of the presumption of innocence. In a social credit system, you are guilty until proven innocent by the algorithm. You're constantly proving your worthiness to participate in society. This creates a psychological burden on the population, a constant low-level anxiety that forces conformity. We are not just building a digital prison, we are building a mental one. The fear of being deplatformed, debanked, or depersoned becomes the primary driver of social behavior. The system effectively privatizes tyranny. It won't always be the government directly punishing you. It will be private corporations, banks, tech companies, employers, acting as enforcers of the state's ideology to protect their own ESG scores. If a bank knows that servicing a problematic customer will lower its own social credit score, it will cut that customer off preemptively. It creates a cascade of exclusion where the individual is crushed by a unified front of state and corporate power. The net is being woven around us, but it is not yet closed. We are in the transitional phase, the twilight between the analog world of freedom and the digital world of control. The choices we make in the next 24 to 36 months will determine whether the biometric net becomes a tool of liberation or a digital cage. The push for digital ID is not unstoppable, but resisting it requires a conscious and difficult effort. It requires refusal to trade convenience for liberty. It requires us to value privacy more than efficiency. The first step is awareness. We must recognize that verification is a euphemism for surveillance. When a platform asks for your phone number, a photo of your driver's license, or a face scan just to use their service, you have to ask, is this service worth the price of my anonymity? Usually, the answer is no. We have been conditioned to click, I agree, without thinking. We need to start reading the terms. We need to start saying no. We need to support and use technologies that preserve privacy by design. This is a technical arms race. This means using end-to-end encrypted communication tools like Signal or Session that do not harvest data. It means using decentralized social media platforms where your identity is not owned by a corporation. It means using operating systems like Graphene OS that strip the tracking software out of your phone. It means understanding that free services are the most expensive because you pay with your data. We must be willing to pay for privacy-focused alternatives. We also need to look at alternative financial systems that operate outside the central bank panopticon. Bitcoin, when used correctly with self-custody and privacy best practices, offers a form of digital money that cannot be censored or frozen by a central authority. It is an escape hatch from the CBDC system. There are also privacy-focused cryptocurrencies like Monero that use advanced cryptography to shield transaction data completely. These tools are the digital equivalent of cash, permissionless and private. They represent a parallel economy that cannot be turned off by a switch in a central bank. Most importantly, we must reject the war on cash. Physical cash is the only form of untraceable, permissionless money we have left. Every time you use cash, you're voting for privacy. You are making a transaction that is between you and the merchant, with no third-party surveillance. Using cash is becoming inconvenient. It requires planning. Some businesses are trying to refuse it, but we must insist on its use. We must keep the physical infrastructure of cash, ATMs, bank branches, cash registers, alive through use. If we let it atrophy, it will be gone forever. Cash is the ultimate check and balance. If the power goes out, cash works. If the network goes down, cash works. If your account is frozen, cash works. It is the battery backup for human freedom. The battle against mandatory digital ID is also a political one. We must demand laws that enshrine the right to an analog life. There must be a legal requirement that essential government services, commerce, and travel remain accessible without a biometric digital ID. The digital path must remain an option, not a mandate. We must support politicians and organizations that explicitly oppose the implementation of CBDCs and digital identity mandates. We must make this a voting issue. We must show that there is a political cost to implementing the surveillance state. We are being told that this future is inevitable, that progress requires us to merge our biological selves with the digital infrastructure, that to be a modern human is to be a tracked data point. But technology should serve humanity, not constrain it. We have the power to say no. We have the power to build parallel systems. The biometric net is sold as a shield to protect us. But if we are not careful, it will become a ceiling that limits how high we can rise, a wall that limits where we can go, and a shackle that limits what we can say. The eyes of the orbs are waiting, the scanners are ready, the code is written. The question is, will you look into them and comply, or will you look away and remain free? This is not just a battle for data privacy. It is a battle for the soul of the free world. If we lose the ability to act anonymously, we lose the ability to act freely. If we lose financial privacy, we lose financial sovereignty. The stakes could not be higher. We are the last generation that remembers what it was like to be unconnected, untracked, and uncontrolled. It is our responsibility to ensure that this memory does not die with us. Do not accept the narrative that resistance is futile. Every act of privacy is an act of rebellion. Every cash transaction is a vote for freedom. Every encrypted message is a fortress. We can build a future that respects human dignity, but only if we refuse to build the cage they have designed for us. I'm Tom, and this is The Wealth Collapse. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because when the history books are written, you'll want to be one of the few who saw it coming.